Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. There's a certain lack of sound communication, so it's helpful just to get a sense everybody's out there and can hear me. I can only hear myself. If I take one earplug out, I can hear the river behind me. So if I get to give talks here, there's a little creek right below me, and up this way, a little falls. So maybe if you listen really quietly, you'll hear the little burbling of a creek. People are starting to pop in on screen. Somebody has a black cat that just walked by their living room. He's not going to join us at the moment, but maybe he will later. We have about, I think, upwards of 30 people that are going to be part of the retreat. And I think I get a sense of how this online thing works. This is the first online retreat I've led. So I'm learning, hopefully as fast as you are, how it goes. People sort of come in when they have time. Some people come in with their videos off. Some people have some very cool background screens. So I don't know what they're doing, but there's a very pretty picture there. And at the moment, everybody fits on one screen, 16 people in a 4x4 grid. As soon as the 17th comes, I'll have to switch around windows to see everybody. There's a bird that just called in my background. I don't know if you can hear it. I don't know how good the microphone is on this. Cars honking. There are 2 restaurants right across the creek. People are sitting down to dinner outside, hopefully 6 feet apart. Maybe after a long day of work or worry, finally getting to sit down with oneself and someone else and just take in being together. In whatever way we can. The eyes go scanning across the 4x4 grid, looking at faces, smiles, smiles in response to smiles. And smiling in a language we fully understand. Sitting still and smiling. Sitting still and closing one's eyes, not looking at the grid. A little more richness of perception of the audio field here, car in the distance, fingers clasped, hands warm against the legs, heat wave coming, humidity coming to the northeast. Viscerally relaxing into spending the next 4 days with you all. For a moment, letting go of all the things I considered talking about, questions that people had about the retreat, new people I spoke to, questions they had. There will be time in talks to address those things, including tonight's. But let's for a moment just take in the 4x4 grid, still just 16 here. And just being together. Something I found myself pondering over the last few days, knowing that a retreat was coming up. Found myself sort of characteristically wondering what brings us to these events, what draws us, pulls us towards this. Sometimes kicking and screaming, perhaps, sometimes joyfully. Why are we here? What brought us here? To do this kind of odd thing on a Friday night of sitting quietly and just listening and feeling what's happening. Why are we doing that? Why are we doing that? A number of people have mentioned to me the obviousness of the stress we're all under with COVID afoot, shifts in the very structure of governance in our country. I was just reading about some military type troops in Portland that are picking protesters up off the streets without any warrant or anything. Lots of changes afoot, politically, virally. And with that goes a lot of challenges to ourselves, a lot of stress, a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of fear. to the extent that each of us experiences those things, feels the stress, the anxiety, the fear, could we ask collectively, how does that express itself in our bodies and our minds in the moment as we sit here? How do we know that we're under stress? Beyond the particular responses when we hear the news, hear and read the news, go to the grocery store and see everybody with masks on. Initially, it looked very unusual. I'm starting to get used to that. But apart from specific responses in specific moments, this is frightening, this is scary, this is uncertain. Just to sit still with each other. How does my body and mind express all that? How does each of yours? What are the signals to you? And should we collectively, we grid of 16, welcome all that in for the next 4 days? Tip our hats to it. It's going on. And include it in our sittings. In our homes. What can we learn about ourselves as body minds by sitting quietly? What is there to see that we haven't already seen? That may in fact be right in front of us, literally, physically, viscerally, right here. But we just don't give 5 seconds of time to listen. Out of fear, impatience, discomfort, fatigue, stress, anxiety, and our usual responses to those things. It's an interesting format to do a retreat online for me. Most of my work is done on the computer. So rather than having or being away from everything I know, here's the same laptop with the little light when you're on Zoom. There's the little camera. There's activities, applications, places, Zoom. Strength of the wireless, volume of the headphones, speaker, microphone, battery state. How many times have my eyes gone over those symbols? I can feel my right hand sort of at home. I know how to click fast, a couple of keystrokes. I could be over where my work was on the next screen over. If I'm thinking about shutting down some of the messaging. So when people text me, the little pop-up windows won't pop up going, hey, when do you want to talk? But it's right there. It's very close, isn't it? Our ordinary lives are right next to us, in a manner of speaking. And it seems to me there's a little bit of an art in sitting quietly, in taking a second look at the ordinary, what we think is ordinary, what we think we know, including our senses of ourselves in terms of how we emote, how we react, how we respond. I'm really anxious. I'm really angry. I rage. I'm impatient. In the context of sitting still, sitting, as most everybody I see on the screen is doing in one form or another. We've all sat still many times in our lives, been told to sit still. Is sitting still something we know? Do we really know what sitting still is? Do we? So this format, in having our ordinary lives within our fingertips on the computer, just a few feet away from our kitchen, 24 inches away from perhaps the person we've lived with for 30 or 40 years. Embedded in everything we know and are familiar with. A stellar opportunity to look again at what we know or think we know and see what comes out of that. A lot of questions about how to deal with the pressures of life now, how to deal with tremendous anxiety and fear, sleeplessness. And to one degree or another, if we all agree, the 16 here and maybe the 14 that will come later tonight or tomorrow, if we all agree to sit with what's happening in ourselves, to take a second look at the ordinary us, the ordinary me, will we find in ways collectively and individually how this very simple practice of sitting still with ourselves applies to the most difficult circumstances afoot. And in talking to people, I think there's a kind of a new realism afoot. How are we going to manage this life? under these circumstances. I read through the email that Maggie sent out about the retreat, and it seems pretty comprehensive about how we'll do this online computer thing. And it seems like everybody, people sit still during the sitting. They want to appear on screen, they hit their video. Some people have figured out to leave their screen blank and just to let us know that they're here in some form. Maybe they'll appear later and we'll disappear. Somebody asked me, who's new, is there a regime or a discipline associated with other times in a retreat or in this retreat? What about the break periods, the short break periods, the long break periods? Found myself fascinated with this question. Many of us know from experience at Springwater that during the short breaks, we could get up and walk around the sitting room. How simple is that? Now we're each in not exactly 30 different places. There's lots of pairs of people on screen. And actually something very touching about seeing pairs of people. Very touching. I don't know why. Different body postures and facial expressions on each of the pair. Lights shimmering on one person and another person in shadow. But coming back to the point that we are intimately embedded with our ordinary lives, and I think we ought to turn this bug into a feature, as is said in the software world. If we're going to do a retreat in the midst of our ordinary, well-known lives, then by all means, let's do it. Let's do it wholeheartedly. It's something that I think speaks to this question of how can we bring what we learn and experience in meditation and retreat into our daily lives? It's a very common question. And for a number of years, I've turned that around to say, how can we bring our ordinary, everyday, mundane lives into our sitting and retreat? That sort of duality, instead of how can I bring this there? How can we be open to our ordinary, mundane, seen it, felt it a million times, I know all about this, lives? And to the extent that we bring our ordinary, mundane, I know it all lives into our sitting, physical, visceral experience of sitting, does that shed some light on how to bring meditation and retreat into our daily lives? So just sitting still, yawning, holding a posture. How does that speak to relating to the person next to you that you've known for 30 years, 40 years? Are they worlds apart, those experiences? Just sitting still, feeling your fingers? Is that a long, long way away from challenges of relationship? light years, kiloparsecs. Or is our sitting and our fingers and our sensations intimate with the challenges around us? No gap. And each, if you will, informing the other. Challenges informing our quiet meditation and our being quiet with each other, informing how we move through our lives. Whether it's to go get water, to pass by somebody we've known for decades. And if I give talks outside, there's a church nearby and it does a bell every hour and a ding every half hour. So welcome to my world. Meetings. I love doing one-on-one meetings with people. Welcome any way to initiate signing up. There's a Google Doc. If you're conversant with getting to Google Docs, you can click that link in the email, put your name in a slot, and magically I will appear on the screen when you come. You can email me, or I don't know if people know this, but if you look at the bottom, there's a thing that says chat. And if you click on chat, a window to the right opens. And at the bottom, it says to. If you click the down arrow, you'll see everybody's name. Is my name in there? Oh, I don't see my name in there. I can't talk to myself, but you'll see my name in there. So if you click on that name and say, can we meet at such and such, there's a very simple way to get through to me too, and we can arrange a meeting that way as well. So we have those three ways of doing it. People will probably notice that there's no dialogue in the afternoon. There's only a sitting. Quite by accident, in a talk actually a year ago in the summer 4-day retreat, at the end of the last talk I gave, I think I was going very slowly and asking questions very slowly. And somebody started to respond very simply. And I made no fuss over that. I didn't dialogue with the person, but I let what they said come in, and I carried on with what I was doing, expressing myself while sitting here with you. And I think I asked another question. Spontaneously, somebody else spoke. And that we did that again in the winter before COVID struck strongly. And it occurred to me that it's another way of speaking within this quiet group context that's a little different from dialogue per se. We're not necessarily conversing with each other, but we're speaking and listening in the same space. And from my point of view and other people's, there's something quite different and magical about it that I suspect you might find informs dialogue per se, as you practiced it here. And also how you talk with somebody that you think you know, including how you talk with yourself. So I decided to try it again for this retreat. And I don't have a very rigid structure for how it will be, other than I'll start the talk, and I don't know whether to say if anybody would like to speak into the silence in the way that I am. I don't know how it will go. But there is this opportunity to the moment, it comes to me as sort of talking to the trees. It's not a conversation in the usual sense. And the questions and answers are non-ordinary. But there's something alive. And so maybe we, as a group, can experiment with this format in much the way that Springwater once experimented with the dialogue process. I think you all have my email address now, so if we don't see each other in a private meeting, but you have something you want to say or share, some response to something I've said or a challenge, feel free to email me or text me, and I look forward to hearing from you. And somehow that engagement will find its way into this retreat in a number of forms. Things that we say privately won't be explicitly said in talks, but talks often feed off of engagement one-on-one. And as you know, in dialogues, most of you know, dialogues beget talks, beget dialogues, and so forth. Nothing different about this. Would anybody like to say anything in response, or any questions, any answers? Anybody have any answers? I always love to hear a good answer. Would anybody like to say anything? I don't know if you have the capability. Am I the only one that's allowed to mute and unmute? You want to try unmuting just to see if you can do it? I'll watch the little up. She can unmute. She knows how to unmute. He knows how to unmute. Okay. He knows how to unmute and mute. She knows. Okay.
I'll just say it's nice to see you again. I met you a year ago at Springwater, back when we could be there. That one of the positives about COVID for me is that I can come to more Springwater retreats without having to get on an airplane from Vancouver. It's nice to see other familiar faces. And I don't know why I'm doing this retreat. I just knew it was something I didn't think about. I just said, I'm going to do that. So that's the way it happens sometimes.
Okay, it's great to see everybody, and I'm looking forward to the next 4 days. I really am. We can stop here, and then I forget there'll be a bell at some point, and we'll go off to another round of sitting, and so on and so forth.